right? True self is the field of value in which we all participate and all have direct access to. And in true self, or in the field of value, we understand, friends, that that which unites us is so much greater than that which divides us. Happy New Year, brother. Right? I turn to you with mad delight to resonate the code. Take us inside. Oh my God.
Thank you, beloved Mark. It's a delight to be here with all of you this New Year's Day. This week's Evolutionary Love Code. Evolutionary love is not merely an emotion. It's a perception. The evolutionary lover sees with God's eyes. Because love is a perception at its core, a perception that generates emotion, there is great hope in love. The universe sees, and the universe sees love. The universe feels, and the universe feels love. Seeing generates feeling, and feeling generates seeing. But we must start with perception, because perception can be trained through practice. Personal human love is a unique self-perception. Personal self-love is a perception of one's own unique self. However, one cannot be an evolutionary lover with these forms of perception alone. Evolutionary love requires a perception of the entire evolutionary process and our place within it. Now I turn my word back to you, Dr. Mark.
Wow, Ronaine, thank you so much. We're going to be starting Avatar now, and we're going to spend the rest of this week, probably the 2 following weeks, right, on Avatar. The reason we're going to spend time on it because it's a beautiful way to start the year, because Avatar is going to be with us in culture for the next decade. And because it started in 2009, it's going to be going to 2030. It's a key moment in culture to actually track it and understand it, just like we've done with Dune, or Don't Look Up, or done with Star Wars, and done with, and we'll do with many other movies. It's a way of reading texts of culture, right? A movie is a text of culture. And so we're going to look at this particular text of culture, and we're going to look at it from several different doors. We're not going to be interested in kind of the classical, review possibilities that you can see online. We want to read between the lines. Now, our claim is not in any sense that the understanding that we will develop here was held by the filmmakers. So we're not looking for the intent of the filmmakers. As I've mentioned to some of you before, I once spent a wonderful deep into the night with Lana Wachowski at his home then in Chicago. And we were looking at a movie that he had then made, V for Vendetta, which was a little bit after he had made The Matrix. And we spend the evening or deep into the night talking about what V for Vendetta meant, and then talking about kind of the trajectory, right? The understanding of the Matrix films. And I made it very clear to Lana, and he was madly delighted that the fact that she actually wrote the movie with her sister, right, doesn't mean that she has a better interpretation of the movie than me. And that's critical. And so the piece of art stands, and culture often speaks through an artist or through a group of artists without their conscious participation in that speaking. Culture, reality has many voices. So we're making no claim here, friends, about the intent of the movie makers. We're actually speaking to culture and how culture seizes on a movie, right, as a way to speak into culture. And parentheses, be very careful and discerning about what movies you watch. Movies are an energetic field. What energy do you take into your body? What subtle energy? What vision? And movies at their best are stories. Stories are key dimensions of culture. God loves stories. Reality speaks in the language of mathematics, and reality speaks in the language of story. Story is a core construct of reality. In fact, Robin, one of the first principles and first values of reality is story itself. Story is a first principle and a first value. In the Unique Self Institute, we talk about your unique self story. One of the core projects that I'm insanely excited about, right, which is not yet online, that I've been working on with Dr. Kincaid for a number of years, is the realization that every person is an outrageous love story, that your story is an outrageous love story. And all of these pieces, with the grace of she will come together as the new story of value enters into the world. So a movie is a story, and a story is a core structure of reality. And a story needs to be read carefully. You have to listen to it deeply. Okay, so we're going to start in a strange way. Do we have anybody? Does anyone have? And I know I didn't ask for this before, so I apologize in our pre-meeting. But does anyone have those pictures of Tom that he sent me this morning? I think I send them over. If we can, let's put up those pictures of Tom, right? And then let's put up the evolutionary unique self citation that I'm going to start there, that Tom sent me this morning. And Tom, everybody, is Dr. Tom Ronaine Goddard. We've been studying together since, I think, Tom, 2009, right? When we met in Dawn Manor at that first retreat. And so Tom sent me this morning, he resonated the code beautifully today. And he sent me this morning 2 clips. One was from Lensa. Let's see if we have it. We got a yes here. Is it coming up? It'll come up in a second. Lensa is a major image AI that's actually kind of blown the world out in the last, short period of time. Okay, so put the images there. And that's one. And Lensa is actually the #1 selling app in the Apple App Store. And it's about using AI to create an image. And of course, and I'm not going to spend today talking about Lensa, but let me just suffice it to say, right, there we go, Tom. He's looking good, isn't he? Not bad. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's go back to the regular screen. There's an image. We got it. Fantastic. Wow, right? Whoa, right? So it actually can create an image that's very beautiful and can be very gorgeous, because I actually think that I know Tom well. Tom and I did Holy of Holies. Tom, how many years? Many years, right? And I think for many of those years, it was every week, and then we moved to every month. But we've spent, we got hundreds and hundreds of hours of deep airtime over more than a decade. And so I think I know Tom, a little bit. Of course, he's a mystery, and I bow before the mystery of his uniqueness. But I think that picture actually captures something in Tom that actually an ordinary picture doesn't capture. It captures some of Tom's vision, right, and some of his nobility. And so it actually managed to do something with Tom to bring out something in his image that was actually beautiful. Yeah, he was looking great, but he was also looking Tom, and it actually captured something in him. Tragically, however, right, the capacity of Lensa to accentuate something beautiful, something unique that the ordinary camera doesn't capture, is equally balanced and perhaps even tragically outweighed by its ability to create fakes, to create distortions, right? To create fakes that are almost impossible to identify, right? To actually distort reality. I'm not going to talk about this week and the kind of problem of deep fake images and the problem of Lensa creating realities that are actually inaccurate and that actually can't be discerned by the naked eye. But let's just be aware of it. Now, there's a second form of AI. So I went and asked the second form of AI this week, which is the GPT-3 program. And the GPT-3 program, GPT-3 is a particular module of AI at the leading edge of AI that's made any number of breakthroughs, right, in this past several years and this past several months, actually. And GPT-3, like Lensa, which is an image program, became a public program. You can now register for this OpenAI. I registered for it. Actually, Suzette very graciously registered me for it. I'm going to read you 2 answers to a question, right, that I asked. Okay. And the question was, is value real? And you think you could put that in again, Jamie, one more time? Let's put it at the bottom of the chat box so we could read it together. Fantastic. So the question I asked was, is value real? Now, let's go carefully. This is what the AI said. Now, the reason this is important, and I'm going to ask everyone, don't read it yet. Just hold for a second before you read. Here's the problem. OpenAI is making a claim, and it's an oracular claim. In other words, this will become a form of oracle. Well, this was what Google intended to be. This OpenAI is now outstripping Google exponentially, and I'm sure Google will close the gap with its own version. But the point is, whether it's this OpenAI GPT-3 program or it becomes GPT-3.2, right? In other words, right, however it works, right? Whether it's OpenAI, Google, or some other program, what we're doing is we're developing the notion of an oracle, which means you turn to the oracle instead of exercising your own capacity for discernment. Now, if you think that's an overstatement, right, just think, anyone on this phone, when was the last time you actually used a map to actually map reality? You were taking a trip and you actually needed to use a map. When was the last time you used a map? A long time ago, my friends. Why? Because what you do is you use GPS. And GPS, you plug in the coordinates of where you're going, and you essentially stop, right? You essentially stop using a map. And I know there's a couple of righteous women here who still use maps. We bow to you. But overall, the entire world, right, has stopped using maps. And the reason the world has stopped using maps is because we defer to the GPS. And so literally, billions of people in the world are using GPS. And again, we got Becca and Claire who are holding, right, the relationship to maps. So we totally appreciate that. But other than our two righteous women, the rest of the world, right, is using GPS. And by the way, if you're listening to the replay, I'm reading the chat box and reading the people who say they still use maps. So if you're listening to the replay and you don't understand why am I saying these things in between, it's because I'm interacting with the chat box at the same time. Okay, so stay close, everybody. Okay, so the reason, right, that GPS is so dangerous is because by using GPS, I literally dislocate from the terrain of my life. Right, and the navigational portion of our brain, right, atrophies precisely, and our ability to actually locate ourselves and to be autonomous and to be self-sufficient and to actually know where we are, right, actually falls apart. This is a very, very big deal. In other words, there's an elemental human beauty, but there's also an elemental human laziness that has to be transmuted and overcome. And when an application comes that's very easy to use, that promises instant convenience, we're willing, like the Indians were, to sell Manhattan for a few trinkets. And this is such a big deal. This is such a big deal. So we actually dislocated an entire generation based on GPS. Now stay close. What's going to happen in a relatively short order of time is that the OpenAI will become like a GPS, but not for a location in physical terrain, but for a location in what in Hebrew we call makom, the place, but by the place we mean emotional, existential, psychological, spiritual terrain. So imagine for a second that you're going out with someone and you've been going out with them for 3 years and you're not quite sure if you should marry them. So what you will do is, and you won't be able to avoid the temptation, you will actually ask an OpenAI program. And of course, there'll be higher level programs that you have to subscribe to, and there'll be OpenAI, and you'll say, should Jill marry Tom or not? And what the OpenAI will do, because it's powered by machine intelligence of the kind that is unimaginable, the machine intelligence that we have today is exponentially more powerful than the machine intelligence that defeated Boris Kasparov in the Deep Blue games 25 years ago. That's our current machine intelligence wipes out Deep Blue that defeated Boris Kasparov 100 games to none. So the level of AI and machine intelligence is unimaginable. And what it's doing is it's gathering all of what's called your digital exhaust, or in other terms, the breadcrumbs of your life, or in other terms, it's called reality mining. All three of those are formal terms used in the literature for gathering everything about you and actually then making a determination about what the best thing is for you to do. Now, when I say everything about you, I don't mean which pornographic sites you visited. That's what everyone's afraid of. That's the least interesting thing, right, to AI. Not uninteresting, but the least interesting. What it gathers is your patterns, how you respond viscerally to different prompts, right? How long your finger hovers as a mouse on your Macintosh, or how long you're holding the mouse on a PC before you click. What's the pattern of letters that you use in order to type? How long do you hover on each level, right? And what on each letter, excuse me. And essentially what machine intelligence does is it uses this vast computational power, which is dissociated from feeling tones. Because what AI is a structure that bypasses feeling at its core. A human being is made up by feeling. And we're made up by gluons and quarks, the most elemental particles. And then we have protons, neutrons, and electrons. And then we have atoms. Then we have molecules. Then we have macromolecules. Then we have cells. Then we have multicellular. Then we go up to organelles. Then we go up to organisms. Right? And as in all of those structures of the human being are filled with pulsing and throbbing feeling tone. So that all lives in us. We're informed by the needs, the desires, the pulsing and throbbing, right, of all of reality that lives in us. We live in an intimate universe, but the intimate universe lives in us. What AI does, friends, AI bypasses the intimate universe for computational, raw, unimaginable computational power that seeks to detect general patterns, but enough of those patterns that it can actually begin to develop a pseudo-unique profile on you and what your inclinations are and what your inhibitions are and when you're sad and when you're happy and what the ostensible trajectory of your life may or may not be. And so when Jill wants to know whether to marry Tom, there is no way on God's earth, on Goddess's earth, that she's going to be able to resist the temptation to ask AI whether she should marry Tom. That's an oracle, my friends. Does everyone get that? That's an oracle. And we're going to start asking this OpenAI about everything. Where should I live? Right? How should I resolve this particular argument with my partner? Should I stay or should I go? And how should I engage my life? Right? And this is going to be much more powerful than the new tarot, right? Because the new tarot, right? The new tarot is used by, and when Shot writes in the chat box, this is the new tarot, it's actually exponentially more than the new tarot, Shahati, because most of the world wouldn't even know what you meant when you wrote the new tarot. A very, very narrow sliver of the population with some connection to certain kind of occult traditions has any idea what the new tarot means, T-A-R-O-T. But actually AI, which is making the claim of true gnosis, true knowledge. Oh my God, right? And is claiming authority. Whoa, what does that mean? And the claim made by AI is I'm going to integrate all information and I will tell you what's true. And I will tell you what's not true. And I will tell you what's real. And I will tell you what's not real. And reality will be mediated through this oracular structure that's actually owned privately, that has an entire set of agendas that are invisible, and will be a tool, to borrow Alex Pentland's phrase from the MIT Media Lab, will be a tool of, quote, control, right? A tool of manipulation, of unimaginable power Because this AI, at least from a computational perspective, knows you, but not knows you erotically, not knows you carnally, but knows you in a way that's able to press your buttons, to know when you're vulnerable, right? To know what your patterns are. Wow. Okay. So now with that in mind, let's take a look, and then we're going to go to Avatar. Okay. Let's take a look. So I asked this AI. The question I asked was, is value real? Here's the question, is value real? So here's what AI writes, OpenAI, this a couple of days ago. Value is a subjective concept, right? Meaning it's not objective, right? That refers to the worth or importance that an individual or group places on something. It's not a tangible physical thing, that's true, but rather a concept that exists in the mind and is influenced by cultural, social, and personal factors. Different people may place different values on the same thing, and the same person may place different values on different things at different times. Now, friends, just hold there for a second. Is that right or wrong? It's exactly right and exactly wrong. In other words, value is subjective in the sense that it moves through an individual, but the assumption here and the way that the subjective is being used here as it's not real, right? It's based on, right, worth or importance that an individual or a group places on something, meaning it's culturally constructed. And culture can only create constructions. It's not tangible, that's true, or physical, that's true. It's a concept that exists in the mind, meaning it's not objective. And it's influenced by cultural, social, and personal factors. That's true, it is influenced by them, but it's also beyond them. And that's nowhere apparent. And now, of course, value is not, there's no shared field of value, that's for sure, because different people, right, may place different values on the same thing, and the same person may place different values on different things at different times. Now, that sentence by itself is true, but it's true but partial. It's also completely false, right, in the sense that it leaves out the notion of a field of value, of a shared field of value. Within that shared field of value, within what we're calling a universal grammar of value, we can have radical diversity, because a universal grammar of value is a context for our diversity. And of course, value is mediated through our subjectivity, but our subjectivity itself, meaning our inner personhood, is part of the field of value. We are value personified, and we're unique, but we're also the same, meaning we also participate in a shared field of value. Now, I asked the question again, Jamie, give us the next quote. Let's take a look. I asked it one more time. And this is what it said the second time, okay? Jamie's going to give us the second quote coming at us. Here's the second time. I asked again, is value real too? And this time it got a little clearer. Value is a subjective concept, right? So far, the same as the one before, right? That refers to the importance or worth that someone attaches to something. Now, you got to understand, if value is only the importance or worth that someone attaches to something, well, Hitler attaches value to something, so that's value. And what's the distinction between that which Hitler values, right, and that which we value here at One Mountain, right? Value's got to be something much more than the subjective importance that someone attaches to something. And here the mask drops. Look at the next sentence. Value is not an objective property of a thing. Meaning, I want to get this clear, everybody. Value is not real. That is what OpenAI has told us. Value is not real. It's rather a judgment or evaluation made by a person. Now, is there an evaluative process, right, to actually discern value? Of course there is. But, right, I'm evaluating something that's real. Then, next sentence, different people can have different values and assign different levels of value to the same thing. Now, let me ask you a question, friends. Let me ask you a question. Let's let you get this. This is the heart not only of neoliberalism. Right? This is a postmodern heart. This is a postmodern moment, but it's also a strong conservative moment that makes the flip opposite view. The deconstruction, the failure to articulate a field of value is not a neoliberal problem. It's not just a postmodern neoliberal problem. It's a postmodern conservative problem, and it's a pre-modern conservative problem. Let's understand what we mean by that. Stay close, everybody. In other words, what the classical conservative move is there's a tradition. That tradition is Christian, or a particular form of Sunni or Shiite, or a particular form of Orthodoxy, or a particular form of Tibetan Buddhism. And we're going to tell you what value is. Stay close, everyone. And value is what we say it is, what the church claims value to be. Whether that's Newt Gingrich, whether that's Karl Rove, whether that's George Bush, value is within a very particular parameter. There's not a shared field of value that everyone has equal access to. Rather, value is Christian. Value in Iran is Islamic. But anyone out of my particular read of the field of value has no value, is devalued, and therefore can be oppressed, manipulated, deceived, or killed. That's the neoconservative field of value, number one. The neoliberal field of value, and I don't like the word neoliberal, but I'm going to use that, but I appreciate it. Let's just call it the postmodern, right? The postmodern, right? It's more of a postmodern moment, right? Because I don't want to get stuck in the liberal conservative thing. It's a postmodern moment, but I appreciate the word neoliberal. I'm going to use the word postmodern. The postmodern moment says value is not real, period. So the postmodern moment is rebelling against the conservative moment, which says value is only my value, but it rebels by saying there is no value. Value is simply not real. Now, that's a very big deal because both the conservative moment and the postmodern moment, both the postmodern conservative and the postmodern liberal are both saying the pre-modern and postmodern conservative, as well as the postmodern liberal, are all saying there's no shared field of value. That's the big deal. Does everyone get this? Right? The key, right? There's got to be a shared field of value in which I participate. So my subjectivity, stay close to everyone. Stay close. Everyone with us? Who's with us here? Who's with us? I'm going to find people in the chat box for a second if we can. Who's with us? Who's with us here? This is critical. This is absolutely critical. And it's the way AI is using the word subjective. Subjective here means not real, not objective. But actually, my radical subjectivity is inaccurate. I'm not merely subjective. Stay close, everyone. I'm both subjective and objective. That's actually the nature of reality. We're validating this in this great new story of value that we're doing in cosmologic humanism. Stay close, everybody. Stay close, right? And this is really, really key. So I'm not just subjective, I'm subjective and objective, meaning I'm unique and the same, meaning we all participate in an objective field of value or a real field of value, and we participate in it both objectively and subjectively. Meaning the reason we can have a communicative action, as Habermas calls it, the reason we can have a conversation and we can say the word good and we can have a general sense of what each other are talking about, or we can say the word true and we can say the word beautiful and we can have a general sense of what each other are talking about, is because we participate in a shared field of meaning. Otherwise, we couldn't have a conversation at all. And actually, paradoxically, everybody around the world today, and everyone stay close with me, okay? Stay really close now, okay? Let's move out of the chat box and into our minds and our hearts. Let's kind of feel this. It's shocking and it's beautiful. Let's feel this deeply together. Everyone around the world can have a conversation about the good. And even if we disagree in 1,000 ways, we still vaguely know what we're talking about because we participate in the same field. So we need to realize we participate in an objective field of value. By objective, I mean, not that it's not evolving, it's evolving value for sure, but by objective, I mean real. So our subjectivity, meaning our irreducible uniqueness, participates in a larger field of the real. So my unique self is, stay close everyone, my unique self is not my separate self. My separate self is just me thinking what I think. That's how OpenAI defines the self. OpenAI's self is a separate self, and it's what I value against what you value, and it's Hobbes's state of war, and no one participates in a shared field of value. So therefore, my subjectivity is all I have. Wrong, exactly wrong. And we know that it's wrong in the interior sciences, and we know that it's wrong in the exterior sciences. I actually participate in a shared field. There's a shared field of consciousness. And actually, every great interior science spoke to our capacity to access that shared field. And Albert Einstein, speaking for exteriors, talked about separation as being an optical delusion of consciousness because he was speaking to the truth that there's a shared field of exteriors. And reality is interiors and exteriors all the way up and all the way down the evolutionary chain. So we participate, friends, together, brothers, sisters, we participate together in a shared field of value. And from the perspective of that shared of value, we can articulate a universal grammar of value as a context for our diversity. Our subjectivity doesn't get erased, doesn't get obliterated, doesn't get obfuscated, but we're not separate selves, we're unique selves. What's the difference between a separate self and a unique self? The difference is what comes in the middle. After separate self, there's what we call the field of value, or true self, or the Tao. But the total number of true selves in the world is one. True self is the Tao. True self is the singular that has no plural. True self is the field of consciousness. True self is Shunyata. True self is Atman is Brahman. True self is Adonai Hu Elohim. True self is the great spirit. True self is the great one. True self is the implicate order, right? True self is the field of value in which we all participate and all have direct access to. And in true self, or in the field of value, we understand, friends, that which unites us is so much greater than that which divides us, right? And from that place of a grammar of value, we can create a shared intimacy. But if there's no grammar of value, then there's no shared intimacy. And how did we begin today? We began by talking about a meta-crisis. And a meta-crisis, meaning we're facing existential risk to our very existence, extinction, the death of humanity, and a risk to our humanity, the death of our humanity, of being human as we understand being human. And every one of the challenges, the existential risks and the catastrophic risks, are global, we said. These are global challenges. And we said you can only respond to a global challenge, right, through global coordination. And we can only elicit global coordination through global resonance. We have to resonate with each other, meaning we have to be in the music together. And we can only create global resonance. We have global intimacy. And global intimacy means we have some sense of a shared identity, language. We can talk to each other. And we can only have intimacy, just like in a couple, and just like in a group, an organization, just like in a movement, just like in a global world, which is now a village because there's no more local, and the local is global and the global is local. We need a shared story of value, a universal grammar of value. Without a shared story of value, we can't heal the global intimacy disorder, which is the root cause of the generator functions for existential risk. And the generator functions for existential risk are win-lose metrics, right? Rivalrous conflict based on win-lose metrics, the ultimate failure of intimacy, and complicated systems. Fragile systems in which the different parts don't know what each other are doing, so it breaks down. Also a failure of intimacy. So the root cause of both generator functions of existential risk is a global intimacy disorder, which can only be healed by a shared story of value. And only a shared story of value can create global intimacy, which can create global resonance, which can create the possibility for global coordination, which can respond to global challenges. But friends, what OpenAI just told us is that's impossible. Does everyone get that? I mean, how many people get what we just saw? OpenAI just told us this is impossible because there's no shared field of value. And value is what one person decides at one moment is valuable, and they change their mind the next moment. It's all pure subjectivity. It's subjectivity without any objective field. AI just told us we cannot solve existential risk. That's what OpenAI just declared to the world. It just seeded that into reality. Oh my God, right? Right. So what AI has done is actually disqualified reality. There's no more quality. It's devalued. It's taken value out of reality. Now go with me, friends. Go with me the next step. Okay. And we're going to get to Avatar. I promise. And we got to get this together. So I asked AI another question. Ready, everybody? I asked AI another question. The question was, is love real? Is love real? Wow. Let's take a look. Is love real? Okay, now let's take a look what AI said. Is love real? So you ready? The answer should be yes, but it's not. Right? Love is a complex mix of emotions, behaviors, and beliefs associated with strong feelings of affection, protectiveness, warmth, and respect for another person. Now, is that true? Well, yes. But is that all love is? It's a complex mix of emotions, behaviors, beliefs, all of which are, of course, subjective. Now, there's some truth in that, but it doesn't yet tell us. We asked a question, is love real? Then it goes on to describe love. It avoids the question, OpenAI. It says it can also include deep romantic or sexual attraction. Okay, great, it can. Love's an important part of many people's lives. That's true. And can play a role in relationships, friendships, and families. Well, that's terrific. Now, while the exact definition of love may vary from person to person, meaning there's no shared understanding of love, there's no universal grammar of value. We're not even saying there's 4 major understandings of love. Whatever love is, it varies from person to person. If what love means varies completely from person to person, then love means nothing. A person's experience of love is unique, but even my unique experience of love is shared, because the first principle and first value is not a first principle and first value of uniqueness. Opposites are joined at the hip in Cosmos. That itself is a first principle and first value. And so we're all unique and we're all common. What we share is our common sense. What common sense means is we can do common sense making. We're all unique. We all share in common our uniqueness, but our uniqueness in all of us lives together with our common sense, right? We don't just want a seat on the dais, wrote the poet Charles Reznikoff. We all want a seat at the ordinary table, right? And we're all the same. We're all 99% of our genetic code is the same, and we have 1% that's different. And so we participate in a shared field of value. So love's got to mean something in some sense, which is enacting, disclosing of a shared field. But none of that is available, friends, in any sense, shape, or form in AI. AI refuses to tell us that love's real. In fact, AI tells us that love's not real. Love is merely subjective, varies from person to person. It's an emotion, whatever that means. And AI refuses to affirm that love is a value, that love is real, or that value is real. That's shocking. Now, notice what AI's done. AI has hijacked the real. The real is that which can be measured, that which can be quantified. And measurement and quantification actually are hijacking the real. And so the real, imagine the goddess in prison, the Shekhinah, she, value, Eros herself is in prison. Eros has been imprisoned, it's been hijacked, because the contemporary discourse says the only thing that's real is the eye of the senses and the eye of the mind, empirical sensory perception and empirical logical perception, which are validated by measurement of a particular kind. But actually, what's true is not only the eye of the mind and the eye of the senses, but there's the eye of consciousness. And the eye of consciousness has 4 expressions, 4 ways of seeing. And one way of seeing is the eye of the heart. And another way of seeing, friends, is the eye of value. And another way of seeing is the eye of contemplation. And another way of seeing is the eye of the spirit. These are 4 names for this eye of consciousness that actually discerns reality and knows that love is real and that value is real. And that's a moment. It's a moment that Avatar captured in Avatar 1 in a subtle and beautiful way. And I want to see that with you. And whether they intended exactly to capture it or didn't, doesn't matter. They did. And it's a beautiful, subtle moment. And I want to honor that moment and unpack that moment and hold it with you as we move towards closing. So let's take a look now, friends. Let's take a look now at 3 scenes and the story of Avatar. It's a wild story, and I'll talk about it more next week. But for now, let's just understand the following. There's a planet called Pandora. Pandora is mineral rich with a mineral called unobtainium, that which cannot be obtained, a paradoxical and beautiful name. Pandora is Pandora's box in the myth, but actually Pandora is the Garden of Eden. Pandora, right, houses this beautiful people called the Navi. And Navi means in Hebrew, the prophet, or those who speak. And the Navi are lithe and embodied and awake and alive and this wondrous expression in Avatar 1 of the best of the heart of gorgeousness that can live in a human being. Their technologies are limited, but sophisticated within their own knowing. They don't have evolved senses of the eye of the mind, of mathematics and classical modern technology, but they have a deep access to the field of being, right? To the field of value, to the field of love, to the field of joy, and to the field of the real. Now, as we'll see next week, the Navi are more subtle and more complex, and there's actually not easy discernments that we can make here. There's a lot more to say. But for now, I must want to hold the utter and wild beauty of the Navi. The representatives of planet Earth have come to Pandora in order to steal its unobtainium, to obtain the unobtainable. Grace is a doctor, serious researcher, who's there to study the Navi. She's a good person, but she believes that that which is real is the measurable. And yet she's fascinated by the Navi and by the biological reality of an utterly interconnected field of knowledge in which the Navi, the human being, is actually connected to the field of nature. And the human being can hear the voices of the ancestors, and the human being can sing the song of the birds and can access past and some of future and live in a kind of wildly ecstatic and yet second simplicity harmony with the larger field. It's an idyllic Garden of Eden vision. It's a beautiful vision. It's incomplete. It needs to be integrated with technology. And neither Avatar 1 or Avatar 2 has succeeded, right? They've actually created this technology, anti-technology world and haven't succeeded in creating a larger whole. But bracket that. For now, let's just look at the utter beauty of this Navi people, which we're going to see just in a glimpse. What we're going to see more is actually Grace, Dr. Grace, right? She gets shot as she's attempting towards the end of Avatar 1 to help the Navi. The Americans or the planet Earth representatives are going to destroy the home tree, which is central to the experience and to the biological, neural, spiritual networks of the Navi. Grace is arguing to a man named Selfridge not to let the Marine Colonel Miles Quatrich destroy home tree. In the end, she goes to help. A little bit later in the movie, she's shot. She's brought by Jake, who's the hero of the movie. And Jake is a human being in an avatar body. An avatar, the notion of an avatar is this program developed in the movie by Planet Earth to allow human beings to be in avatar bodies, to actually create a relationship with Pandora, to actually allow, not for peace, but actually for the appropriate success from Planet Earth's perspective of either exploiting all of the resources, extracting all the resources of Pandora, and ultimately in Avatar 2, actually throwing the Pandorans off Pandora in order to make it the new Earth for the dying Earth. That's kind of the subplot. So let's take a look. And let's look really carefully. It's a beautiful, beautiful set of 3 short clips, and we'll just talk about it for a moment. So take us inside Avatar 1. Here we go.
I'm not talking about some kind of pagan voodoo here. I'm talking about something real, something measurable in the biology of the forest.
Which is what exactly?
What we think we know is that there's some kind of electrochemical communication between the roots of the trees. like the synapses between neurons. And each tree has 10 to the 4th connections to the trees around it. And there are 10 to the 12th trees on Pandora.
Grace is dying. I beg the help of Ewa. Look where we are, Grace.
I need to take some samples. Jake.
Grace.
I'm with her, Jake. She's real.
So what happened there? Grace, the doctor, was later shot trying to help the Navi, but it's earlier on. And she's talking to Selfridge, and she's a scientist. And her sense of the real, what's ultimately real, is at that point still mediated by the measurable. She's a good and wonderful person. But when she says it's real, it's got to be measurable. And look what she says. She's talking to Selfridge, right? And she says, you know, kind of really beautifully. I just had it here. Some other text just came in. Hold on one second. Let me just find it. She says, I'm not talking. Grace says, I'm not talking about pagan voodoo here. I'm talking about something real. That's the question. What I asked AI was, is value real? Is love real? She says, I'm talking about something real. And her next sentence is about real, immeasurable in the biology of the forest. So she's this wonderful person, Grace, and yet she still understands, because that's the mediating prism of late modernity and postmodernity, is what's real is that which is measurable. And of course, she unpacks, you know, what she thinks is real, the electrochemical communication between the roots of trees, like the synapses between neurons. Each tree has 10 to the 4th connections to the trees around it. And there are 10 to the 12th trees on Pandora, and that's more connections than the human brain, right? A global network. And the Navi can access it. They can upload and download data, memories at sites like the one you destroyed. So at this point, Grace is a beautiful person, but doesn't quite get it. She understands that there's this unimaginable biological supercomputer. She understands that it's unimaginably significant, but it's real is because it's measurable. And that's how she tries to transmit it to Selfridge. And she's shot, and she's near death. And both Jake and Grace are now in their avatar bodies. So in their avatar bodies, they're now in Pandora. They're in their avatar bodies. They bring Grace to what's called the Tree of Souls, which is the center. But of course, this network is not AI. And this is what's so beautiful. This network is not open AI. This network is not only data. This network is not super computational power that's cut off from the gluons and the quarks and the protons and the neutrons and the electrons and the atoms and the molecules and the macromolecules and the cells and the multicells and the organisms that we talked about. This network that Grace is accessing is actually deeply connected to the feeling tone of all of reality. All of feeling is a network, and there's value in the network, and there's the full range of the infinite real is in the network. It's precisely the opposite model of OpenAI, which bypasses the full range of infinite quality and depth of infinite reality, of the infinity of intimacy, of the eros and desire and quality of cosmos, which is a field of value and consciousness. All of that is bypassed by AI. But this network in which the Navi participate in, You follow what's happening here? The Navi can access this network because they're part of it. They're not alienated from the field. They're actually directly participating in the field of value itself. So they have direct gnosis, they have direct knowing, they have direct carnal knowledge of value itself. Wow. And then there's this enormously beautiful prayer scene. And it's a subtle scene. It's a sophisticated scene. It's not a fundamentalist scene, and it's not a New Age scene, which are equally dangerous, which basically assume that we control reality through our amulets or through our prayers or through our New Age affirmations. And actually, the woman who represents the Navi says, sometimes Ewa heals, and sometimes she takes us back into Ewa. And there's a deep understanding that death is not the end of reality. That death is actually a night between 2 days, and Grace is too weak. Her wounds are too great. And right as Grace is being gathered up, right, as she enters the tree of souls, right, if you remember what she says weakly with a kind of ironic humor to Jake, she says, I should take samples. She's still the biologist, as she should be. But in her last moment, she says, I'm with her, Jake. She is real. I'm with her, Jake. She is real. Her sense of the real has been completely transformed. She sees with the eye of the heart. She sees with the eye of value. She sees with the eye of the spirit. She sees with the eye of contemplation. She sees with the eye of consciousness. The real has opened up to her. She no longer talks about the real because it's measurable. She talks about the real which she lives in and lives in her, to which she has direct access, and from which all decisions, all direction emerges and flows. It doesn't flow from turning to the oracle of open AI, which bypasses the field of the real to give us only a sliver of the real, that which is accessible through exponential computational power. And that sliver of the real is holy, is important, and we need AI. Right? AI is here, right? AI could have, as Nick Bostrom writes in his book, Superintelligence, some years back, AI could have exponentially positive impact. But AI itself has to be located in the field of value. AI itself has to be animated by first principles and first values. And if we don't actually animate AI itself and download, because we're the people that are programming AI, and that's critical. This AI, this open AI that I shared with you at the beginning of this conversation, which we're about to close now, was programmed. And it's why it accessed certain strains of information. In this case, it accessed a postmodern view of reality. It, for example, didn't answer the question, is value real, with a classical conservative take, Christian values real, or religious values real. Those dimensions were actually edited out by the programming itself. And so although the AI pretended to be objective, integrating all information, it wasn't. It was actually accessing a particular current of information. So AI is programmed. We have to download into AI evolutionary love, value. And we have to create the checks that ensure that AI itself becomes a tool and not an immersive environment that causes the death either of our humanity or in other scenarios, the death of humanity. Wow. And we can only do that, friends, if we know that ultimately death is not the end of the story. We actually have a lived realization of a wider field. I know that David Ray Griffin, to whom we dedicated this week's One Mountain, whose past has moved into another reality. I don't claim to know the exact contours of that other reality, but I know that death is not the end of the story. I know that I'm with her, Jake, and she is real. It's only when I know that she is real that I can begin to respond to the meta crisis, that I can begin to actually create the most beautiful world that we already know is possible. So thank you, everyone. Oh my God. Happy New Year. We just began Avatar. This was week 1 of 3. We got to touch one set of scenes. It's a beginning of reading these texts of culture